It takes me between 12 and 14 minutes to get to class. I time myself every day. I know it's weird, but it's something I do. I pay a lot of attention to time, I always have. I leave my house at 8:40 on the dot and arrive at school between 8:52 and 8:54. Depends on how long it takes me to cross 2 streets and how quickly I'm walking. Once I did it in 11 minutes, but that was on an outlier. I got to my classroom and walked in to find the class before still going. I excused myself and backed out. Must be running late. I checked my watch. 8:43. That was impossible. I couldn't sprint to class in that time, and I certainly hadn't been hurrying this morning. I must have left early and misread my watch. That made sense. I had class at 9 and then a seminar at 10 for 2 hours. I walked over to the student center for lunch and decided to read outside. I sat down at 12:15 with a sandwich and a book. I read for a while, close to 100 pages, and I checked the time. 12:20. That was impossible. My watch must be dying. I'd go to the bathroom and then swing by the bookstore to get a new one before afternoon class. I went into the bathroom and closed the stall door. Suddenly all the lights went out. I have no idea how the bathroom was so dark. Had someone closed the shades over the windows? I fumbled my way out to the door and opened into a darkened building. It was night. I checked my watch. 7:30? I walked down to the exit and thankfully locked from the outside and started to walk home. Home was an old house my weird aunt used to own. When she passed away, the family decided I should live in it for a few years while going to school. I could keep it up and save money on student housing. I was honestly not impressed. The house is too big for me and it's creepy. I'd rather live in a dorm with friends, but my family gave me the guilt trip. The house came with weird rules too. No roommates, no bringing friends over. It was a strange place. I watched the clock carefully at home. No issues. Everything took the time it should take. Maybe I was sick? I had been stressing about my exam the next day, 4 long essays for my English Lit course, and the professor was a hard grader. It must have been the stress. That night I slept of dark figures standing over my bed and I was paralyzed. "She's come unstuck," one of them said. "It won't be long now." I woke up alone, covered in sweat. My walk to class took 13 minutes the next day. Everything was back to normal. I got to my exam at 10:03 and started writing furiously. My arguments were fantastic. I was prepared for the questions. I filled the blue exam book up and then filled up half of a second one. I felt so great, and I was that first student to walk up to the front of the class and turn in my exam. I knew I had gotten an A. The professor flipped through the exam books with a bemused look on her face. "In the future, if you want to cheat, you shouldn't be so blatant about it." I was aghast. "I didn't cheat." She laughed. "There's no way you wrote all of this in that time." I checked my watch. 10:07. I ran out of the classroom and didn't stop until I got home. Nothing made sense. I entered the front door and checked my watch. 10:16. I booted up my computer and I had to find out what was happening. I had 945 unread emails. I'm an inbox zero type of person. I never go to bed with unread emails. How did I get this many emails since I woke up? I checked the date. 3 weeks had passed. I hyperventilated for a few minutes. Something was wrong with me. I decided I would walk back to campus and go to the health center. They could call an ambulance and get me to a hospital. I had to get there quickly. I walked outside into the freezing cold. It made no sense. It's a warm October day. I was just outside. I came upstairs to get a jacket and decided to check the weather to see how it got so cold in the last hour. I don't understand what I'm seeing. It's supposed to be October 2014. The news doesn't make sense. Is someone playing an elaborate prank on me? Why does my computer say November 2018? I think I needed to go to the hospital. Something is very wrong with me. I'm from a parallel universe, and for the moment, I'm stuck here. No, I don't mean I experienced some glitch in the Matrix, nor do I mean I erroneously remember Mandela dying in prison and concluded being from a parallel universe is a much more plausible explanation for this than the unreliability of human memory. I mean I deliberately came here from a parallel universe using a machine developed by generations of scientists. Being here, I feel obligated to share some information with you that you're not aware of due to the fact that you didn't yet develop the technology to travel between parallel realities. The knowledge I'm going to share with you is going to be upsetting for a lot of you. Due to this, first, I'd like to establish how much we do actually know about parallel universes, so you can understand my claims are not simple conjecture. Universe hopping, as we affectionately refer to it, as traveling between parallel realities, is not quite what you imagine. The devices we use to do this are as ubiquitous to us as cell phones are to you. We call them watches. Sadly for me, all our electronics are powered wirelessly, and unlike your phones, that they don't have an internal battery. Hence the stuck here part. Universe hopping itself hasn't been a scientific endeavor for generations. At this point, it's a recreational activity. One thing you guys got right is sci-fi, is that parallel universes are pretty much similar to each other. So when one goes universe hopping into a yet unexplored, for a lack of a better term, universe, it's standard procedure to exchange all information about all parallel universes we know of between each other. All of this data is accessible through our watches. It's a more sophisticated version of cloud storage. I don't blame you for not immediately realizing the implications of this, but bear with me. Billions of people for every parallel reality casually universe hopping. Constantly exchanging information means we have aggregated and analyzed data from multiple Googles. There are about 100,000 universes we know of where life just never developed, but other than that, things are not all that different from one another. Yours is the odd one out. Something went very wrong with your universe. I'm going to oversimplify a lot of things because frankly, I'm not a historian, and with my watch not working, I don't have access to our historical records. For some reason in your universe, the Sumerian civilization fell instead of acting as a great unifying force, eventually bringing the Roman, Egyptian, and Chinese empires into an international union. What you call the Enlightenment happened some 2,000 years too late from my perspective. The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, never happened anywhere else. When your Europeans reached what you call the Americas, not only did you not know where they were, you inadvertently, and later very intentionally, decimated the native population by infecting them with diseases they had no natural immunity to. Just so you understand how truly exceptional this is, there's literally only 4 other universes where this contact happened before the invention of vaccines, and there are no universes in which the Americas didn't have their own international union. To truly put things in perspective, before you, the least technologically advanced reality we'd found just finished colonizing their entire solar system. You're all living in the worst version of reality. You're living something that truly is more horrifying than any dystopian fiction we have created. I wish I could tell you what went wrong. I wish I could tell you what made all of you this aggressive and adversarial. I wish I could so you could fix this and join the rest of us, but I really don't know. By now, someone most likely already noticed I'm missing, and it's only a matter of time before they figure out where I went. They'll probably assume I'm the first of my reality to stumble upon one of the universes with no life, and I suffocated to death. So they'll come with a portable energy source and I can go home. I don't know what's going to happen to you or what we'll do about you. If I were to guess, your universe is probably going to be locked out. Inaccessible for travel by the public. Like lifeless universes, because, I'm sorry to say it, but you're just too dangerous for us to be around. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I lived with my grandparents in South Carolina. They had this big house that used to be a stop on the Underground Railroad, and I used to love discovering all the cool passageways that ran all over the place. When I wasn't doing that, my grandfather took me fishing and hunting while my grandmother would teach me how to sew and cook. Kind of girly things for a little boy to be doing, but those skills definitely helped out in the long run. My folks were military, so rather than drag me around and traumatize me with multiple moves, they had me stay at my grandparents'. My room sat at essentially the middle of the house. It was surrounded on all sides by thick walls which used to house passageways but had since been sealed off. I hung up pictures and cool things befitting an 8-year-old's room. I loved that house, but it started to feel a little off after a while. I noticed that my things kept disappearing. Nothing incredibly valuable, just trivial things like my toothbrushes and combs. No, they never reappeared at some random place, and I would never see them again. My grandparents spent a fortune on my various grooming products. I imagine it was just my stuff, though, which left me and my family in confusion. They used to joke that a ghost must have been taking a liking to me. They were kidding, of course, but I started to really get freaked out over this notion. I started paying attention to very minor noises and details, and whenever something odd did present itself, it would creep me out to the extreme. I remember drying a favorite shirt of mine, only to come back 5 minutes later to find the dryer door open and my shirt gone. My things would be moved, but pictures of me that were on the walls would go missing. Most importantly, these little holes started appearing in the walls around the house. They first showed up in my room, and they just popped up all over the house. The kitchen, the bathrooms, the living room, everywhere except the master bedroom, where my grandparents slept. This really creeped me out, so one night I decided I was going to sleep in their room. I slept in a pretty comfy sleeping bag on the floor, and for the first time in a while, I felt pretty safe. 2 a.m. rolls around and I wake up to this weird tapping sound. It's almost as if someone was hammering something a little ways off. It was in the middle of the country and people are often awake during random times at all hours, so I started to write it off. The moment I started to shrug it off, I happened to look at the far wall, directly facing me, just in time to see a jagged piece of wall fall out, leaving another tiny hole. I yelled and woke up my grandparents. They were genuinely upset for me, so we packed up a few things and left for the weekend. When we got back, the first thing I noticed that is almost everything in the house that hadn't had anything to do with me was either gone or damaged. My room was now host to at least 30 different holes, all in varying shapes and sizes. I was exhausted and all I wanted to do was go to bed. Me and my grandparents stood in my room and demanded whatever was in the house to leave me alone. There was no great relief, there was no angry outburst, there was no ghostly laughter, just silence and me feeling scared and a little silly. I decided to be brave and stay in my room that night. I awoke around 12 a.m. to a thump, the kind I usually attribute to my family moving around knocking into a wall. I started drifting back off only to hear another thump, then another. Eventually, these grew pretty rhythmic. I was scared out of my mind. I bolted upright and started scanning around my room. I grabbed the flashlight that I had grown to keep on my nightstand and started shining it everywhere. The floors, the walls, the holes. The thumping stopped, but I kept looking around frantically. Eventually my beam caught something shiny and I fixated on it. As soon as I realized what it was, I screamed and started crying like a little girl for my parents. It was a human eye. My grandparents came in and saw this, an unblinking human eye staring out at the room. The police were called and came immediately. They opened the sealed portions of the house and searched every passageway they could find. Eventually they came to a section behind my far wall, where the eye was located. I wasn't privy to the information when I was that young, but when I got older my grandparents told me what it was. The police came upon a tiny room, only big enough to hold one person comfortably if one barely. They were first greeted by what they described as a thick layer of garbage and waste. Most of this garbage was my things that had gone missing. My combs, my toothbrushes, my socks, my shoes, my washcloths, my favorite shirt. At the wall, surrounded by pictures of me, was a man. He was completely naked. The only thing keeping him upright was a belt around his neck looped over a nearby low rafter. The cause of death was autoerotic asphyxiation. He had died staring at me, pleasuring himself, surrounded by his sick fascination with me. I don't think there's any getting over it. I can't stand the dark now, and now, when I go to sleep, all I can think about are the holes.